Since you started watching the NewsHour tonight, our nation's debt has grown by more than $140 million. Its total sum is $37 trillion.
America was built on debt, but not the kind that drags nations down, the kind that built an empire. Today, the United States owes more than $37 trillion. On paper, that looks like collapse, but in reality, it's the foundation of American power. The question is, how did the most indebted country in the world become the most dominant one? To answer that, we have to go back. After World War II, the world was broken. Europe was in ruins, Japan's cities were ash. The United States was untouched, but it was also deeply in debt. The war had cost over $4 trillion in today's money, and Washington had borrowed heavily to fund it. But something strange happened. Instead of drowning under the debt, the U.S. came out stronger. Why? Because it had something no one else did: global trust. In 1944, before the war even ended, world leaders met at a small hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. There, they created a new financial order. Every major currency would be tied to the U.S. dollar, and the dollar itself would be backed by gold, $35 an ounce. That single agreement turned the dollar into the backbone of the global economy. The United States could print and borrow money, and the world would accept it. America had just turned its national currency into an international tool. But power invites overreach. Through the 1950s and 60s, America spent freely. Military bases across Europe, wars in Korea and Vietnam, a global military network that dwarfed anything before it. Money was flowing out faster than it was coming in. By 1971, other countries began to worry. France, led by Charles de Gaulle, accused the U.S. of exporting paper for gold. He sent ships to New York Harbor to exchange dollars for bullion, literal tons of gold. It was a moment of panic. The entire global system risked collapse. Then, President Richard Nixon made one of the most consequential decisions in modern history. On August 15, 1971, he went on television and announced that the U.S. would no longer convert dollars into gold. The gold standard was dead. The dollar was now backed by nothing except faith. Many thought this would destroy the American economy. Instead, it did the opposite. Because what followed was the true birth of the American debt machine. Without gold to limit it, the U.S. could print and borrow freely. But if the dollar was no longer tied to gold, why did the world still accept it? Enter oil. In the 1970s, the U.S. struck a secret deal with Saudi Arabia. The Saudis agreed to price all their oil in U.S. dollars, and in return, America would provide military protection. Every other oil-producing nation soon followed. That deal created the petrodollar system. If a country wanted oil, it needed dollars, which meant holding U.S. debt, which meant lending to America. Now, the U.S. could borrow indefinitely, and the world would fund it. From then on, every global crisis made the dollar stronger. The 1980s saw huge tax cuts and military expansion under Ronald Reagan. The debt tripled, but foreign investors kept buying treasury bonds. Japan, West Germany, and later China poured trillions into American debt, trusting its stability. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the U.S. emerged not only as the world's only superpower, but the world's banker. And that's when borrowing became strategy. In the 2000s, after 9/11, America launched wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Each war cost trillions. But again, the debt didn't destroy it, because the world needed U.S. treasuries. It was the safest asset on Earth. Then came 2008, the financial crisis. Banks were collapsing. Economies were freezing. And in the middle of the chaos, everyone rushed not away from dollars, but toward them. In a moment that defied logic, the biggest debtor nation became the safest haven. The Federal Reserve began printing money on a scale never seen before. Trillions in quantitative easing. The national debt exploded from $9 trillion in 2008 to $23 trillion by 2019. But the world didn't punish America for it. Instead, they bought even more. Because U.S. debt wasn't just borrowing anymore. It was the system itself. When the pandemic hit in 2020, the machine went into overdrive. Washington unleashed over $5 trillion in stimulus. Checks to households, bailouts, business loans. The economy should have collapsed. Instead, it roared back. By 2025, U.S. debt reached over $37 trillion. Interest payments alone, more than $1 trillion a year. Yet, the world keeps lending. Why? Because for every other country, there's no alternative. The US dollar makes up around 60% of global foreign reserves. Most international trade, oil, metals, semiconductors, still happens in dollars. And global finance runs on US Treasury bonds. Even China, America's biggest rival, holds nearly $800 billion of them. The same tool America uses to fund its government also funds its rivals' stability. That's the paradox of the American debt machine. The more the US borrows, the more powerful it becomes, because the world needs those dollars to function. But every machine has limits. In 2023, for the first time, the US paid over $659 billion in interest, more than its defense budget. Rising rates now threaten to make debt service unsustainable. Some economists warn that within a decade, interest payments could exceed all discretionary spending combined. Meanwhile, new powers are challenging the system. BRICS nations are exploring dollar alternatives. Saudi Arabia is flirting with the Chinese yuan for oil. The European Union is pushing for digital euros. But here's the catch. Even as the world talks about leaving the dollar, they can't. Not yet. The global financial web is too deep, too entangled. America's debt isn't just its burden, it's everyone's. So the US keeps borrowing, keeps printing, keeps leading. Because the American debt machine isn't just a policy. It's the foundation of modern capitalism, the oxygen of global trade, the invisible chain that keeps nations tied to Washington. But one day, something might break that chain. A crisis too big, a default too close, a trust too shaken. And when that happens, when the machine finally stops, the world will find out what America really owns and what it merely borrowed. Until then, the machine keeps turning. The debt grows higher, the power grows deeper, and the illusion of control remains intact.